Welcome back, all our 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ, here with Tim's Nation, to bring you the list that's going to be taking on Lane in our next battle report. As I mentioned in our Halloween episode, I have a ton of Necron lists and things I want to try out, especially with our new data sheets. We haven't had any new units this entire edition. We had some upgraded kits. We've seen the previous units get buffs, but no new units this edition. So this is the first units that we have, and I want to try them in many, many detachments. Some for just fun, and some to see if there's some value behind it. As I'm a couple of things that I've noted that I feel is that the movement tech with the Geomancer, it could either be a complete bust or it could be amazing. We've seen in the past where movement tech can actually be very strong and change the entire face of the game, where Thunderfire cannons were, during older editions, a very big threat. Being able to slow down your movement and stop units from scoring points and scoring on objectives. So having something that does movement tech without a dice roll, that it's just you, -2 move to your move characteristic, -2 charge, could be critical. So I definitely want to see that a little bit more. The macro sites and what they do, multiple different buffs that we can get off of them, as well as the fact of giving that scout move to the Geomancer. And then the Tomb Crawlers. The Tomb Crawlers are probably the biggest one, especially because I am running the Canoptek Court again today. In the Canoptek Court, there are some stratagems that target Canoptek units. Now, I've had a couple people say, oh, wow, this means the Dev Wound one. No, not the Devastating Wounds. So this comes into that realm of what's different for models and units. When an ability checks if a unit is a specific thing. For example, in this case, a Canoptek unit. It looks at the unit and sees if any model in that unit has that keyword. This is the same for infantry. So when you shoot at wraiths with an anti-infantry weapon that are led by a Technomancer, they are affected by the anti-infantry because they have the infantry keyword joined to their detachment or to their unit. Now with the Canoptek, this is the similar thing. So there are stratagems out of the Canoptek Court, such as the reactive move, which is a big one. The 18-inch loan op ability. Those ones target a unit and say, target a Canoptek unit. So by having one model, or in this case two, that have the Canoptek keyword with them, this allows them to get targeted by it. So things like the Immortals and Warriors that can get joined by Tomb Crawlers can gain this ability. Now, the Devastating Wound stratagem specifically says that Canoptek and Cryptek models gain Devastating Wounds. So that is where it's different. You could target the unit with the stratagem, but only the models that physically have that keyword would then get that buff. So it's very critical to look at some abilities and see when and how they target for those things, because you can have some amazing interactions or you have interactions that don't really work that well. In this case, the big one we're looking at is going to be how the Tomb Crawlers can boost and interact with this army. So I am going to be taking a squad that can be joined by the Tomb Crawlers, and that's my Immortals. And we're going to see how much of a boost they get from some of this stuff. So we kind of redesigned the Canoptek build that I was going with because of these Tomb Crawlers, and we'll see how this goes today. So, all right, let's talk about the list first, then we'll talk about some of the little tech, if I don't just talk about it when I'm using them, but we'll talk about a little bit more what I'm kind of thinking with some of this stuff in these first. This is definitely a test with this list. This is only a test. All right, here we go. 2,000 points on the button, Canoptek Court. So the Canoptek Court is the detachment that gives me reroll 1s to hit from my army, but you get full rerolls to hit if you are within a power matrix. A power matrix is your home deployment zone. No man's land if you control at least half the objective markers there at the beginning of any phase, and your opponent's deployment zone if you control the objective marker there at the beginning of any phase. The reroll 1s buff also only goes to Canoptek and Cryptek units. So in this detachment, there's only really one unit that is not going to be getting the buff from the Canoptek detachment, and we'll more on that in a minute. So that's pretty much what the detachment does. Now, remember, it's a Canoptek or Cryptek unit. So like I said, anything that's led by a Cryptek is going to be able to have access to these buffs. All right. So let's talk about the outlier first. We are bringing the Void Dragon today. So at the end of it all, I was messing with this list a bit and deploying, and well, we'll talk about that more actually after this. So basically, I had 300 points left. I was messing around with a couple ideas, and I said, you know what? It's getting to the end of the edition. Let's just steer into the curve and bring a Catan. Catans are super durable, and I know they are. My thing is, I like running more Necrotier units over the Catans typically. And there is something to be said about the fact that Catans are slow with a 6-inch move, and they're not like Necroni in the sense of being skeleton robot stuff. But you can't ignore how durable these guys are. 4 up invuln, 5 up feel no pain, cut damage in half. You can neutralize an opponent's entire turn with the existence of these guys. On top of it, they hit very hard. So we're taking the Void Dragon today because I wanted a bit more damage output. And so he's the big guy that we want in there for it. We have some anti-infantry capabilities and some good anti-infantry weapons, not with the anti-infantry keyword, but for the aspect of they're very good into infantry. So we went with the anti-vehicle thing to kind of balance out the slate. He can, whenever he does damage to vehicles, he can damage vehicles and heal himself, which can get real obnoxious to your opponent to then have that happen and then go into living metal on top of it. So you're just healing this guy up a lot. Toughness 12, 11 wounds. He is a monster, literally, figuratively, not figuratively, literally. He has a monster keyword, so he cannot go through walls. And he only has a 6-inch move. But he is a unit which both Catans, once you get them to a point where they can threaten objective, that's when they really shine. You don't need to have them on an objective early, but once they threaten that objective, they make your opponent have to decide. If they put a cheap throwaway unit on there, then you don't need to dedicate the Catan. Something else can take it down, and this detachment, something like Wraiths, can pick that unit up and take the objective back. So your opponent's going to have to try to dedicate something real, and that's when the Catan pounces into action. Well, in theory. So the Void Dragon, a lot of his stuff is geared towards anti-vehicle, but he still has a strong presence into non-vehicle units. He has his tail, which gives him a couple extra attacks there. And then he just has a bunch of attacks himself. I think he comes in at like 10 or 11 attacks. I'd have to look at it again. I apologize for not having that one committed to memory. But he's got around like 10, 11 attacks between the two profiles. So he can still do a lot of work there. Everything with him is very, very short range. His spear only throws at about 12 inches too. But he does have the Voltaic Storm as well, which is good going into infantry and other things like that for a bit of extra damage and multi-shot effects. So the Void Dragon does really well at being kind of like a multi-facet where like the Nightbringer just hits things really, really, really hard, which is great, and sometimes all you need. The Void Dragon does hit that nice little middle. The only thing with the Void Dragon is it is random damage. D6 plus 2 for his big hits. So you could end up going from 3 damage to 7 damage on a single hit, which can be a little frustrating and cost you some CP to get a better result. But all in all, just because of the high volume, and the biggest thing is his just sheer durability, that's the reason we're taking him here today, because it now is just another unit in my army with a 4-up invuln and some stupid resilience. Moving on, we have 3 Canoptek Doomstalkers. So Doomstalkers out of this detachment are gold. They're Canoptek units, so they'll get the full rerolls to hit. And for 1 CP, when you overwatch, these guys overwatch on a 5-up instead of the 6-up. And since their the Canoptek ability is full rerolls to hit whenever they make an attack, this counts. So they get the full rerolls to hit for the overwatch as well, making them very, very threatening to be. If a big 10-man brick drops within 24 inches in line of sight of them, they can take out 3 or 4 guys, especially with the flat 3 damage. They're able to hit some of these what are they called? Gravis armor marine stuff and take them out. Toughness 8, 12 wounds, 4-up invuln. Again, that 4-up invuln, you're going to hear me say that a lot with this detachment, and it spreads over the army really nicely to be able to constantly have that resilience factor that if the dice start spiking in my favor at any point in time, I can really start messing with my opponent's numbers where they shoot into me expecting a damage result in one unit to do the job, and I 4-up invul and a bunch of stuff and go, no, I'm sorry, you're going to need something else. So that is, that's kind of an overarching theme with a lot of this list, is trying to keep as much durability in there as I can. 8-inch move on these guys so they can move very well. And yeah, good range, high damage, strength 14, AP 3, 3 damage, really nice gun on them. So yeah, we got 3 of those guys here today. They're cheaper than the Doomsday Arcs. And because we are running the Canoptek detachment, they do better because of the fact that they get the full rerolls to hit, where things like the Doomsday Arcs would not. Moving on, going into Canoptek, so let's go over to the Wraiths. We have a 6-man squad of Wraiths. Now, typically I run these guys and their Technomancer with the enhancement that gives them the Infiltrate. Not doing that today. We're going to put these guys on the table. They have a 10-inch move, so they're very, very quick. Their main ability is that when they move over a unit, they can do mortal wounds for each model in the unit. This is very enticing to put the Crypt Thralls in here. I didn't have the points to do that today with this build, but I really definitely thought about it. Otherwise, you just have to have one. And there is some combat tricks to that, because you don't have to clear the move. You move over, move back, you moved over the unit, and so now you do that damage, and that's some nice little extra mortal wounds. Their little particle pistols that they have are strength 5, 3 shots apiece that are AP 0, but do have dev wounds as well. So these guys have there's a lot of dev wounds in some weird ways with AP 0 through a couple of Canoptek units, which I really like to have, because it's even when you just pour into something, you're going to throw a couple of 6s, so you get a few wounds, even if your opponent's spikes are safe. So having stuff that takes a dice roll out of the game, you don't have a saving roll for a couple of those hits, helps for damage to go through. It's the same thing like with torrent weapons that automatically hit. Yeah, you just automatically have things going over the wound phase. Anytime you can just efficiently, lethal hits as well. Anytime you can take out a dice roll and guarantee results, always is going to be a good decision. So these guys having those dev wounds is really nice. In combat, they're not as strong. Strength 6, AP 1 with 2 damage. The AP 1 tends to cause most of the problems. My Geomancer and friends could, if close enough to them, give them +1 weapon skill to let them hit a little bit better with the full rerolls to hit. And I have been on the fence a couple of times. Let me know what you guys think. I have been thinking about switching these guys over to whips. It's 8 attacks for the whips, which means that they get, with the full rerolls to hit, it just means more volume that we can put down on the table to guarantee more hits from these guys and give the biggest point in time that we're rolling dice would be the hits, because we'd have 8 attacks apiece. And we have rerolls there. So getting those attacks over into the next phase, where we go from strength 6 to strength 5 with the whips, means that we'll have a couple scenarios where we're going to be wounding on 4s, where the 6s would be wounding on 3s. But we have more dice that we're throwing at it. So it's only 1 damage, where the Wraith's sides, or the claws, are 2. So I've stuck with the claws because of the 2 damage. Let me know what you guys think. I've been really considering switching over to whips, or actually switching a couple of them over to whips in the last couple of weeks, just because in the Canoptek Court, these guys don't necessarily do that much damage. So I figured maybe it's toss a bucket of dice at the problem and make it go away. Maybe. Moving on with Canoptek units, we have a 2-man squad of the Canoptek Spiders. So not bringing my package of 3 spiders today, because I have something else that's going to kind of do what they do in the shooting phase, and we'll see how that runs. But I still do love my spiders. I still got to run with a squad of them. These guys have 2 guns on each, so that means it's 4 shots with the particle blaster or particle beamer. Each one is D6 shots with blast, so you're looking at 4 D6 shots blast. Strength 6, AP 0, 1 damage with dev wounds. These guys hit on 3s, but they have the full rerolls to hit that can come from the Canoptek Court. Means that you can pour a bucket of dice into something. And in units that have high model count, they really pour a bucket of dice, because each one of those, each gun is going to trigger the blast. So even if you only have 5 guys in the squad, I'm getting +4 shots with the unit, because each individual gun is going to generate blast. In combat, they're pretty good too. They have a weapon skill 4, which is usually the soft point, but again, with Canoptek Court being able to get the full rerolls, these guys can then wreck pretty hard at 5 attacks apiece, strength 8, AP 2, 2 damage. They're able to push through and clear stuff off and hold an objective. So love them for that role. They also give an aura of a 6-up Feel No Pain to all vehicle units, which today will only be the Doomstalkers, but they do have an aura effect to give a 5-up Feel No Pain to 2 units, Necron units, so not just vehicles, that suffer damage from a psychic attack or mortal wounds. So that does include the dev wounds. So in matchups where my opponent is definitely coming heavy, like Thousand Suns, where they have a lot of psychic attacks, or someone has a heavy amount of devastating wounds, these guys, having one squad of them really allows it in a position to shine, because I can really reduce how much damage my opponent's doing to any of my other units that don't have a Feel No Pain on them. Moving on, we are bringing 2 3-man squads of Canoptek Scarabs. Because we don't have as many spiders here today, we're not running as many Scarabs. These Scarabs, the job is very simple. Know my opponent. The deployment for these Scarabs is crucial. Actually, probably one of the biggest crucial deployments for the army. Depending on what my opponent's doing, if they have a build that is a lot of up-down units, Scarabs may be hanging out in the backfield to help zone out in the backfield. In others, where my opponent's on the field, these guys are going to be on the front lines to move up there, tag objectives, and stay near a Cryptek while creating a screen so my opponent can't just rush right into my front lines. So where these guys are going to be deployed, backfield, front field, is going to be very important, is going to be very army specific. But all in all, their job is zoning the table. Whether they're zoning out the backfield, zoning out the sides, or screening the front, that's what their job is. Now, Scarabs are OC0, but if they're within 6 inches of a Cryptek model, which we have 4 different Cryptek models, 5 different Cryptek models that they would need to be in range of, they'll get that OC1. So they can be something that goes out there, barely touches an objective, and force our opponent to have to commit to destroying a 40-point unit, so that we can then bring another unit out there and destroy their value piece, or a piece that just is more expensive than the Scarabs were themselves. So that's the role with them here today. They do explode to do damage. Mortal wounds, you roll a dice, and anything but a 1, you do D3 mortal wounds. On a 6, you do flat 3. And but we probably won't see very much of that, because I have a feeling they're going to get shred before they get anywhere. But they could end up charging in and popping and blowing up. The spiders are able to put Scarab back. Each spider can put a Scarab model back. So if we're down to 1 model and we get them back to the spiders, or we're near the spiders, yeah, we could fix the squad back up to full strength. So that's a positive, but a lot of that tech is not going to be as crucial, because of what the spiders are going to be doing with kind of zoning out the backfield and protecting Doomstalkers, versus these Scarabs that, when they're zoning out the backfield, are going to be much further away and hopefully not getting shot at. And if they're on the front line, they'll probably get splattered before a spider could even get to them. But it is some little tech and some pieces that have that probably at some point will come up in some games. If the more I run this list, if I stay with this, it's probably something that'll come up more frequently. Lethal hits on the Scarabs are good, especially with Canoptek and full rerolls, so they can actually chew through and do some random damage. And they do reduce OC by 1 to units that they're in combat with. So this is another way to be able to take an objective away from someone, just by reducing OC2 down to OC1. They can't reduce it to 0, so it's only effective in the multi-OC unit things, but reducing OC for a unit could be helpful. So there's a lot of little pieces of tech that Scarabs can bring and do that's very, very situational for them to have those effects. But the overarching feel is board control with these guys. All right, so moving on, we have one of Lane's favorite models, the Psychomancer. Psychomancer is a Cryptek. He is going to be leading nothing. He's going to float around the field. The biggest reason we take him is because he has a ability that does not require line of sight. You target a unit within 18 inches, and they take a battle shock test at -1. You do this at the beginning of any phase. This is something that you can use to steal an objective from somebody, or reduce an OC on something. So I can just put, make a note OC0, so that now I can move a unit on there with OC1 and take a no man's land objective for Canoptek control in the center, going to go into my shooting phase. Or you shut down a unit that has defensive stratagems and now go, you can't use stratagems on them, so I can just hit them as hard as I want. Other than that, the Psychomancer will probably just, again, be in there for secondary objective scoring, float near the Scarabs to be able to give them the OC value when they're up on the front lines, and kind of zone out some sides of the table so that my opponent's not really able to do like deep strike right in the middle of my army. So a good piece all around, especially at 55 points. Love these guys. Next up, another one of Lane's favorites, Illuminor Xeris. So Xeris has a lot. Now, first of all, I'm only bringing one battle line unit today. Talking about them last. But I was taking Xeris and Canoptek Court without any battle line units before. So it's not a matter of not having a lot of battle line units for his abilities. Xeris is awesome in his own right. So Xeris is a Cryptek. So he gets all the buffs that Crypteks get from this detachment. No stand back up that he gets out of Awakened Dynasty, but he's still toughness 8 with 9 wounds, 2 up save, 4 up invuln, 4 up feel no pain. He is a sponge. On top of being a sponge, he now out of Canoptek Court, his spear, his 36-inch range, 3 damage, strength 9, AP 3 spear. He can get full rerolls to hit on that thing, and it's got crazy range. Then full rerolls to hit in combat because of the Canoptek Court ability too. A lot of strength there. Now, ability-wise, he has Lone Op when he's within 3 inches of a Necron unit, which makes him just that much harder to take down. And he also has a effect. Okay, so if he ever destroys a unit in combat, this second aura gets an additional 3 inches to it range, or destroys a model in combat. It starts off at a 3-inch range, and battle line units within 3 inches of them get +1 AP when they make an attack, and also reduce AP1 or reduce AP by 1 of attacks going into them. So armor contempt. We only have one battle line unit, but in the past we haven't had any, as I mentioned, and I still take Xeris as it is. So now it's just an extra buff and kind of guides onto, yeah, I'm definitely going to be using that and want to keep my battle line unit near him. But for that ability, because it's definitely a boost, especially the armor contempt in this scenario. But it's now something that I was always taking Xeris, and it's like, cool. Now we're getting more value out of him with this build. Moving on, we have our Geomancer, and he is going to also be bringing his little macro sites. So Geomancer and friends are making their return. Interesting with this unit. One of the things is when we talk about screens, if I'm going into a huge up-down detachment army that I can do a lot of it, the Geomancer can separate by himself and go hang out on my home field objective and just zone out 12 inches and go, here, this is what I'll do this game. So you can't drop in on here. 75 points, not a bad investment. The macro sites are the ones that have scout. So when the Geomancer leads them, they confer the scout move because the Geomancer has the ability that he gains scout when leading macro sites. But otherwise, these guys have scout as it is. So this is a little cheap, kind of cheap. 85 points is pretty pricey. But it's a 5-man unit that can scout move, so we have another screen. They'll get blasted to the wind, absolutely, when they do that. But otherwise, with the Geomancer, they give him basically 5 additional wounds and the scout move. Now, the 12-inch deep strike deny only triggers when you're on an objective, but that means a scout move and then a move puts us on an objective with the 5 little additional wounds from the macro sites, and to be able to zone out something in middle of the field to push our opponents back when they're trying to deep strike in. Now, one thing I'm still wanting to see, the Psychomancer leadership buff has been amazing, and I think more and more people are seeing that as we get later into the edition. Let's talk about this move debuff. It's done in the movement phase. You have to have line of sight, but you can do it before or after you move. You target a unit within 18, -2 to their move characteristic, -2 to their charge. Need to see this in play a couple times. Is this dead? Is this worthless? Or could this be good? And I'm just going to let the table tell me. Let's see how it goes in the game and play it out, because it's one of those things that's like you can't knock it until you try it, because this thing could be pretty brutal into some armies that are putting everything on the board, and you go, okay, you know what? -2 move to that thing, and now you're blocking the rest of your army from progressing. Think about it with like Imperial Knights or something like that going, oh, now you're stuck here. You can't move through that unit because you're a big knight and you can't finish there. So there's some interesting tech there with him. The macro sites, again, there's one ability I want to see changed, but we're not talking about that. It is what it is. So the macro sites, once per battle round, can give +1 to a reanimation protocol roll to a unit within 3 inches. They can give +1 weapon skill to a Canoptek unit at the beginning of the fight phase. And, to get them charging into something, they can go give -1 to hit to enemy units that are within 3 inches of them. Now, yeah, technically this is also shooting as well, but considering you could just kind of move away from them, yeah. Unless, I guess in the sense of going into heavy weapons, it's like make your opponent go, okay, I guess I'm moving. But then in which case, they're -1 to hit. If they're getting +1 to hit sitting still, which washes with the macro site's ability. And then if they move, they lose the +1 to hit, but then they don't get the -1 to hit. So not as efficient as shooting phase, but in the fight phase, that's where you really can do that, where your opponent's locked in. It's, haha, you can't move away from me. Now you're -1 to hit. You can hit the macro sites if you want, punch them, get rid of them, cool. But then whatever else you're in combat with is going to just be able to sweep through, and you're -1 to hit if you go at that unit. So pretty nice. I like that a lot. And also, too, when you charge them in, you can play some games where your opponent might only be able to get 1 or 2 models on the macro sites. So it's like they don't even take out the unit entirely. Even though they're weak, they're toughness 3, 1 wound models. They just might not have the sheer number of attacks to take them out. You leave a couple there, and then they start reanimating back in. Because, again, with 1 wound models, every pip that you get on your reanimation is an entire model coming back. And if you want to use their +1 reanimation battle round ability on them, you get the whole squad back. So it is tough to take them down. It's going to be a 50-50 on when they join the Geomancer and not. I got to kind of just judge my opponent's army and decide what we're going to do. But both which ways have plays. It kind of depends on where the Geomancer is going to be. Does he have to sit on home field objective and protect there and protect my backfield? Or can we be more aggressive and get the Geomancer up the front? One little piece of tech, we'll see if it plays out today, that I did not think about in our initial game with this that actually does work out well. By putting the Geomancer directly on the front line with that scout move, if I go first, I can move that Geomancer straight out 8 inches to get within 18 of my opponent's unit, hit them with the 2-inch buff, and then go duck behind a wall afterwards, really messing with them on turn 1 and kind of locking some units back in their deployment zone unless they have a way to just pick them up off the table, or forcing my opponent's hand and making sure and go, well, you're going to have to pick that unit up or it's going to sit back there. I mean, not really the biggest thing in the world. I mean, it's kind of like going up to someone and saying, listen, I'm going to give you $100 and you have to like it. Here, take this $100 bill and be happy about it. Kind of the same sense if you're playing an up-down army. You go, yes, I'm going to make you use your rules that you built your army around and on the units that you want to use them on. So, Geomancer. We'll see how he does today. And last, this is where we're starting the new tech. 10 Immortals with 2 Tomb Crawlers, Overlord with Translocation Shroud, and a Chronomancer. The Immortals are going to have Tesla. This is a weapon that gives them that has assault, so they can advance and shoot, and it has sustain 2, strength 5, AP 0, 1 damage, 2 shots apiece. With the Canoptek detachment, this would be a Cryptek unit, so they will get the full rerolls to hit access in the Canoptek control. Full rerolls to hit with sustain is awesome. And when you have sustain 2, it's doubly awesome. The Overlord gives this squad an auto advance 6 because it's the one with the Translocation Shroud. So this squad is going to be much faster than Immortals normally are. And the Chronomancer, he's going to give the unit stealth. But the reason I'm taking him is more for the fact that when you shoot with the unit, after you finish shooting, you can then make a move with them. So this unit can move out, shoot, and then go duck and hide behind a wall. The Tomb Crawlers are the thing with the Canoptek keyword. So if you get close to this unit, they can run away. If you try and get an angle on them and shoot from afar, I can use the strat to make them low knock. When I mean run away, I mean use the counter move because they're a Canoptek unit. It makes this unit very, very, very difficult to interact with. You have to play a lot of games, use some strats, and use a lot of abilities that you may not want to spend just to interact with this squad and then to maybe do damage. Now, no invulns, no feel, no pains coming into this unit at all, so if you do hit them, they could get hit pretty hard. But the Overlord does have a Resurrection Orb, and since they are 1-wound models, we can rebuild the squad relatively quickly and get them back in working order. Not taking that much away from them when we have to pop those things, as long as one Immortal remains from whatever volley he decides to hit us. But again, the goal is to make the squad very difficult to interact with in OC2 and be able to have them bounce around the field and just pouring shots down. This is the reason why I went down to just one squad of spiders, is these guys have a similar role, but more reliable because it's not random number of shots. No dev wounds and no dev wound access, but they do have full rerolls to wound when shooting at units on objectives, and reroll ones to wound anyways. Into any unit in general. So a lot of rerolls from this unit, a lot of damage coming out of them. Toughness 5, 3-up save. You can give them they get the AP 1 from Xeris. They get the Armor of Contempt from Xeris, so they need to be kind of near him. And then the Tomb Crawlers, if they get within 12 inches of something, the Tomb Crawlers give them the ability to ignore any modifiers that our opponent would try to use to our hit rolls to make worsen our attack. So that's kind of cool in Death Guard matchups to go, all right, you're -1 to hit. Doesn't matter here. That's just where Death Guard typically go into my list, because of the fact they look at the armor and go, the armor debuff doesn't matter. Majority of your army has a 4-up invuln, so we're not even going to bother with that. So that's the big. That's my big brick. That's my big head brick, lead brick. The enhancement on the Chronomancer is going to be the Infiltrate. So these guys can start off in a beautiful position that I can bounce them out from, shoot, and then just bounce back if need be. So yeah. That's the last unit, and that is the list. So this is one thing that we've all been talking about, the Tomb Crawler Canoptek and what they can do for the Canoptek Court. So I'm very excited to try this out. It's kind of like a weird Warp Spider in a sense. Not quite as damaging as what Warp Spiders do, especially point for point, but Warp Spiders don't reanimate. Warp Spiders are toughness 3. So Warp Spiders, when you do get a hold of them and hit them, they are relatively easy to destroy. They do have a better save because they're aspect warriors, but it's small squads typically, and that toughness 3 means you're putting a lot of damage on them. So you can start hitting and really reducing them down and weaning out their damage. We reanimate at a toughness 5 and the armor contempt. So I can grow guys back to be able to still hit efficiently and effectively. Also great objective holding units with the OC2. So we'll see how it does. It kind of gets into a point where it's like, okay, they look like Warp Spiders, but there's so many things that are different between a Warp Spider and the Immortals and their functions and what they do, that it's like, how much do they really compare in that aspect? Especially when you go and slap an Overlord on there and you do get full rerolls to wound into units on objective markers, that Overlord gets full rerolls to wound in combat with a devastating wound weapon. So there's a lot of tech there. Oh, and then the fact that each of the Immortals are 2 attacks apiece is just hilarious. Look, Xeris is nearby, so we're 2 attacks, strength 4, AP 1, 1 damage. Cool. We can punch things and actually leave a mark. But yeah, all in all, that's going to be a big piece to see how it goes. It is an expensive unit. 155 points. I'm sorry, 150 points for the Immortals. It's like 80 points-ish, 80, 85 points for the Chronomancer with the enhancement. Then you have 85 points for the Immortals, another 50 for the Tomb Crawlers. I mean, it's 200 points right there, 150 for the Immortals, 250 for the Crypt Thralls, already taken up to 200 points. Then when you combine the characters, you're clearing 300 points with this one unit. But there's a lot of different roles that they can play. They can take the objectives, they can shoot and scoot all game long. So I'm curious to see how they play out. And then being able to have access to all those other Canoptek strats they didn't have before can be very, very interesting to be able to low-knop them, or bigger, doing the reactive move when our opponent tries to get close to charge them. we go, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to move 6 inches back, and now your charge just became significantly worse, or 5 inches back, whatever it may be. So definitely want to see them out there. Now, the Void Dragon. I'm not one that typically runs Catans. Again, I said that I'm just not a fan of them in the lore aspect and everything. I get what they are for lore. I'm just not a fan so much with them in the army because what appeals to me is some of the skeletal stuff. And throughout the edition, I think it can be justified not running a Catan because of how much points they are, how slow they are. And if you have a bad dice roll thing, you are in a lot of trouble because if your dice go south on it and it just falls, that's a huge chunk of your army and a huge point of damage that's gone. So I like to use things that are a little more Necrotier and like Locust Heavies and things like that do the damage, that have access to more abilities off it. Because again, Catans usually aren't allowed to touch most of our abilities. Look at Hypercrypt, for example, which makes sense. But look at what in Hypercrypt, you can't do a lot of what you used to be able to do with them. But it gets to a point, we're getting towards the end. I'm not going to ignore the fact of what the Catan can do. And when I put the army on the table, I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with this list. So I built most of it and I deployed it, put it on the table in a deployment zone, and went, okay, this unit starts here, this unit starts here. Where's it going to go and what's it going to do? And I recommend this. If you're really struggling with your list and wondering if you have too much or not enough of anything, and I do this all the time, just deploy it. It's a way you can practice by yourself without seeming weird, like you're walking from one side of the table to the other to play two separate armies, which I have done myself to go, okay, because this army is going to move here. I've played a game against myself. Many of us have. But in this aspect, and I don't think they're weird for doing it because you know what? I've done it too. But my children will probably say I'm pretty weird. So anyways, getting off topic. When you deploy the army, you're able to kind of get an aspect and like a move. Like, okay, so if I move here, this unit can go here and do this, that, and the other, and kind of just get a visual of where everything's supposed to be on the table and where things will be. And when I did that, my army looked like it covered everything nicely. And the one thing I looked at was like, well, my damage isn't really there. I need some things that hit a little bit harder. And I looked at a couple different options, but then when I started to put in the units, things like Scorpex that I've run in the past, I started to look at like, okay, but where are these guys going to start on the table to do these things efficiently and be part of the game without just getting shredded? And it came down to a fact of I don't need more units. I needed to bundle it up and put that damage in one big chunky unit. Void Dragon. And the reason for the Void Dragon was I had literally exactly 300 points. So I considered, one of the other things I considered and might try it in the future was dropping one squad of Scarabs for a squad of Flayed ones and then taking the Deceiver instead. Bit cheaper, allows me to do the redeploy tech, which could be kind of cool with my Canoptek Doomstalkers, being able to pull them off, put them in strategic, and moving the Flayed ones after they zone out and have the Flayed ones, another infiltrating unit, able to help me get Canoptek control in the early phases of the game. So I did like that. The flat 3 damage in combat was kind of where I wasn't exactly. I felt like I needed to go that tick above it and have the higher damage kick that the Void Dragon brings. So we're going to bring him today. I think that I still like, it's one of those things that it's like back and forth, like maybe, but I'll try both of them out, see how they feel. For right now, Void Dragon hits a lot harder because D6 plus 2 damage and can heal when the vehicles, and when we have a bunch of vehicles in the meta, Void Dragon stands strong. So plus I haven't ran him that much. So we'll go ahead and give him a try. So that's pretty much everything. That's the list. We'll see how it does into lane and whatever Marine-based concoction he's going to bring this week, because I know he's playing Marines, but I have no idea what else he's playing. So, all right, guys, as always, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.